Welcome, everyone, to the Boiling Point Podcast. I am your host, JD, and it's just going to be me on this episode. This is episode 77, The Political Cloud Around the 24th Winter Olympiad. In this episode, we're going to talk about some of the political things that were happening around China, the U.S. political boycott of the games, and why and what is happening that people have some problems with. And we're going to talk a little bit about the medal count. Most of the Olympic coverage is being done now on our sister show, Mayhem Original. You can find them on Facebook, facebook.com/Mayhem Media Inc. That's where all the entertainment episodes are going to be now. We did one on the Super Bowl as well, which is why the episodes here on the Boiling Point Podcast have not been as frequent as they usually are, since we separated the entertainment side and the Super Bowl. The Olympics were all happening at the same time. They should start flowing a little more regularly now, as I've learned to balance two podcasts. And, of course, I host a third with Pennsylvania Predator Hunters. Make sure you check that out. Just search on Facebook, Inside the Exposure. Check that show out as well. Our channel is on Rumble, rumble.com/c/The Boiling Point Podcasts. That's where you can find all our episodes. Our storefront is bonfire.com/store/The Boiling Point Podcast. We got new shows, new designs out, new clothes, so check that out. Pick up some apparel. Marcus Frederiksen, he does all the music. Make sure you give him a listen. We miss you, brother. And the Paralympics are going to be starting on March 4th, so I'll be doing at least one episode covering them, where Ms. Pana will probably also talk about the regular Olympics and the finale and some of the new sports that we got to see and stuff as well. So let's talk about the Olympic counts. We're going to talk about the medal count first. 27 different countries win medals in these games. Out of 91 countries, that's a 30%. 30% of countries win a medal, so that's not bad for Winter Olympics. The Winter Olympics are not as big as the Summer Olympics. Not as many countries go, and there are not as many events as well. So we're going to talk about the gold medals first, and Norway wins that one. They win the Winter Olympics. I believe this is going to be their 8th Winter Olympics that they've won, where they've won the most gold medals. 16 for Norway. Germany was at 12, finishing second. China had 9. The U.S. came in fourth, tied for fourth actually, with Sweden and the Netherlands. We all had 8. Austria and Switzerland had 7. The Russian Olympic Committee had 6, and France had 5, rounding out the top 10. The total medal count, Norway led that as well with 37. The Russian Olympic Committee came in second with the total medal order at 32. Germany in third at 27. Canada with 26. The U.S. came in fifth in total medal counts with 25. Not bad for how we do in the Winter Olympics normally. We won a few medals that we weren't supposed to win, and then there was a couple of events that we were supposed to win medals in that we actually didn't. So it was an interesting game for Team U.S. in these Winter Games. Sweden, Austria, and Japan all had 18, and Netherlands and Italy 9th and 10th at 17. The U.S. did not lead any medal count, gold, silver, or bronze. So not the greatest games of the U.S., but pretty average for how we do in the Winter Olympics. We dominate in the Summer Olympics, but the Winter Olympics, we've only won the most gold medals in one Olympics, and I believe that was in 1932, if I'm not mistaken. So let's move on now. We're also going to talk about, we're going to get to China here in a few minutes, but also this year the IOC released a framework on fairness, inclusion, and non-discrimination on the basis of gender identity and sex variations. The web address is on the screen for you, and it's in the description of the video, so make sure you check that out. You should give it a read, because I'm not going to cover the whole thing. I'm just going to talk about a couple of things, so you should give it a read, because it is important. They do contradict themselves a couple of times, and I'm going to read you one of the, this is in the first page, so if you want to check it out yourself, you can read this right on the first page here. This is from the IOC. Every person has the right to practice sport without discrimination and in a way that respects their health, safety, and dignity. At the same time, the credibility of competitive sport, and particularly high-level organized sporting competitions, relies on a level playing field where no athlete has an unfair and disproportionate advantage over the rest. So as you can see there, they're saying they're not going to discriminate, and they respect what the choices that people's made, but at the same time, is what they say, that the credibility of the sport depends upon a number of many things, and if someone has an advantage, which they do, men who become women have an advantage over women. You can go check it out. There's another story we just shared on the Facebook page about a team of swimmers who they have a trans female athlete, a teammate, and they're not happy about it, and they all wrote a letter and saying that they didn't like it, and good for them. Protecting women's sports is a very real important thing. Now, in the rest of their many-page document, like I said, you can check it out for yourself. I'm not going to cover the whole thing. It's very long, and it's very, very technical in their wording, so just be careful. You can confuse yourself real easy, get lost. But basically what they did decide is that the IOC is leaving it up to individual sports to decide who's allowed to compete and who shouldn't. Now, before I read over their page when the new one came out, I thought that they were just going to allow trans athletes across the board. It didn't matter since they were changing it, because they were doing tests, urine tests and testing for hormones and stuff like that. They've stopped doing that, and now they're just leaving it up to individual sports. And that's probably the best way to handle it. If the IOC just starts deciding things for all sports, that could be a real problem. You don't want a dictatorship. So leaving it up to the individual sports is about the best way to do it. So now what we have to do is people who, if we don't want to see women get pushed out of their own sports, we can focus on the local and state and the countrywide organizations to protect women's sports, especially the NCAA, which we'll be talking about in a future episode, and their trans policies and stuff. Back to the games and some more of the political stuff. U.S. did do a political boycott of the games. They allowed the athletes to compete, but they did not send any political delegates. Now, they did that because of the ongoing genocide and crimes against humanity in Xinjiang, I think is how you pronounce that. It's forced labor, and there's also forced labor going on in addition to genocide. And apparently, mainly, it's also against the mainly Muslim population that some of this is happening also, but the Christians are also being persecuted in China. It's important not to forget about that, because a lot of the stories I read were just about Muslims, but Christians also face discrimination in China. So the U.S., in addition to doing a political boycott of the games, they said that it wasn't fair. They didn't think it was fair. The U.S. government didn't think it was fair to punish American athletes who have been training for years, but that it wasn't right that they contribute to the fanfare of the Olympics also. Our best friend, Jen Psaki, told reporters that the athletes have our full support, and that's been about the only comment on the Olympic Games from the Biden administration, is that the athletes have our full support from Psaki on the podium. Now, the U.S., in addition to boycotting the games, they also are begin boycotting goods from Chinese companies accused of forced labor, mainly solar panel companies, but a few other ones as well, from a couple of different locations in China. Any company that has been, I'm not sure if it's just accused or if anybody's done any background on it, but U.S. is boycotting some goods from Chinese companies accused of forced labor. So that's also something that we're doing, in addition to the political boycott of the games, which I can understand and I respect that. Actually, I think that that's fine. And I also agree with not penalizing the athletes. They're not political. They just want to compete, and represent their country, or at least most of them do. Some of them will renounce their citizenship and then go compete against or for another country. Now we have some pages up here, so check these pages out if you want to see. It's a list of some China's abuses that they're being accused of. We have them up on the screen for you, and also in the description. Make sure you check out the description if you want to see this. Genocide and crimes against humanity occurred during the year against the predominantly Muslim Uyghurs. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. I apologize. And other ethnic and religious minority groups in Xinjiang. The arbitrary imprisonment or other severe deprivation of physical liberty of more than 1 million civilians, such as forced sterilization, coerced abortions, more restrictive application of China's birth control policies, rape, torture of a large number of those arbitrarily detained, where they were detained for pretty much nothing, forced labor, the imposition of draconian restrictions on freedom of religion or belief, freedom of expression, and freedom of movement. Something to note there is that China doesn't necessarily have any of those as a right anyway, so, which is why our country is so much different. We have, those are all rights: freedom of religion or belief, freedom of expression, and freedom of movement. Those are all rights we have here in America. They do not necessarily have them in China anyway. There are many. There's lots of human rights issues. There's a whole list. The page is up. Take a look at the link. There's also possible internment camps they're being accused of as well. So, China is not, we know, if you don't know that China does this kind of stuff, then you haven't been paying attention. And what we're doing, America is doing, is we're boycotting the games and we're boycotting some Chinese companies. That's about the extent of what Joe Biden's administration is doing right now. And that's why it's important we keep our freedoms. Speech is speech, and free speech means all speech. Hate speech is not a thing. We can't start limiting our rights, because then that's it. That's the beginning of the end. Once you start restricting some things, and it's going to become easier to restrict others. In Canada, they can't even, if they misgender someone, even by accident in Canada, then they can be fined or imprisoned. So think about that. Freedom of the press. We just need better press in the U.S. right now, is one of the things that we have that China does not have. Of course, we do have CNN, who are terrible right now, but they should, they should be allowed to stay on television and say whatever they want. We as consumers and citizens, we just need to stop watching, and then once their ratings go away, or somebody else buys them, or they're forced to sell, then maybe they'll actually start covering the news correctly again. That's how we as Americans can do it in our society. We're consumers. We just stop turning it on, and they'll get the message. Something else that we have that China doesn't have is our right to have a lawyer present during questioning, being provided a lawyer if you can't afford one. In China, the government is detaining people indefinitely and putting them in internment or work camps. They don't, for years before they even get a trial or anything. How we treat prisoners compared to the rest of the world, of course, it's debatable, but is much better. The prisons and detention centers in China, according to the reports on the pages, are atrocious conditions. The entire report is 78 pages long. So that's why I cannot cover all 78 pages myself. I just don't have that kind of time to just read over it and study it. And plus, I'm sure it would have to be more than one episode. So go check it out. The link is up on your screen, and it's also in the description of the video. This is, like I said before, this is pretty normal from China. This is normal behavior from China, and now all of a sudden it's become a big deal. It is a big deal, and we should do something about it. But I'm just wondering why now we're not even doing something about it. But attention is now being drawn to it, probably only because of the Olympics being in China. If they weren't in China, then the Biden administration probably wouldn't have anything to say about China. because we're not doing anything to stop China or Russia, for that matter, who is invading the Ukraine. China has control of Taiwan and doesn't give them their independence. While China and Russia aren't necessarily working together, or at least that I'm aware of, there's been no official recognition of that, but they're certainly not in opposition of each other at the moment, so that could be a dangerous thing. Our administration is even using China as a go-between for the situation in Ukraine. China is calling for talks and for compromise, not the U.S. So we've now been relegated to asking China to be calling for peace, because people don't want to listen when our administration talks. It used to be the U.S. and the UN, for what they're worth, that calling for peace when things like this would happen, but now it's China calling for peace and compromise, as much sense as that makes. Of course, both these things with China and Russia and the Ukraine especially, is a very serious situation. Their civilians are fighting right now. I'm going to do an episode on them upcoming here in the next week or two, so look for that. I didn't have a lot of time to get prepped for that for this episode. It was supposed to stay about the Olympics, but it is happening, and it's one of the things that affected the Olympics, so look for that later on, and I'll be talking about the Russia-Ukraine situation and what's happening. But yeah, we could potentially end up with a war against Russia, and then if we end up with a war against Russia, I don't know if China will be getting involved or not, but we'll have to see. So the upcoming midterms this year, at the end of the year, is very important. Make sure you vote in this upcoming elections, because we got some serious things in the world happening, and we need serious people to solve them, and Joe Biden is not that person. That's where I'm going to end this episode. Short episode, but hopefully you enjoyed it, and you learned a little bit about what's happening. Check out our storefront, bonfire.com/store/The Boiling Point Podcast. We're on Rumble, YouTube, Parler, Facebook. Other episodes are coming this week. Look for them. Marcus Frederiksen, he's going to play us out. That's the end. I'm not around, have you found? I'm always on you.